the history of Hollywood. There's a lot of way to tell the story about the history of Hollywood. One, we've got Bob Yerkes over there, who's a stuntman who's been witnessing in Hollywood for 55 years. You know the cross that you see over Hollywood when you drive through? Do you know the cross on the 101? Bob Yerkes put it there. He paid for it. He dropped it into the cement, and it's almost indestructible. They have tried to take it down. So with Jesus, Bob was able to put the cross over Hollywood years ago. And behind Bob is another Bob, Bob Munger, who did The Omen years ago. And if that didn't scare the devil out of you, I don't know what else would. You know, there are a lot of people who could tell you the history of Hollywood. We just inherited all the files from the church film office. But I want to say that it starts a long time ago. Because as I said when I was up here before, God has created us in His image. And that's the image of being creative and the image of being communicative. So people ask you why you're so creative and communicative. It's because you're created in the image of God. And when you talk about entertainment, the word entertainment in Hebrew is related to a banquet. And God talks about entertainment throughout the Bible. And what is the first thing that happens to us when we go to heaven? He throws entertainment, a banquet for us. To be more practical than that, modern drama grew up in the Middle Ages through the mystery plays. Because we were creative, when the church embraced creativity in communications and art, we had Michelangelo, we had the great artists, we had Bach, we had Beethoven, but we also had plays. And those plays were just wonderful. They went on for 10 days. The worship never stopped, Faitine. Never. Now, you know, motherhood is good. Well, let me start. Fatherhood is good. There's some of us fathers who fail once in a while. There are two of my children there, Robbie and Evie. I don't think they'd say that, I hope. I'm praying. But motherhood is good. There's some mothers that fall short. The church is the bride of Christ. So we love the church. But there have been people in the church over the years that have made mistakes. Is that true? So there were a couple of priests who did not like the mystery plays, which was all about Jesus. So they went to Pope Innocent III, and he removed the mystery plays. And what happened? Because you are creative and you're communicative, you went into the highways and byways and made the bawdy Renaissance dramas. In the beginning of movies, the Lumiere brothers, the Pathé, if you saw Hugo, if you saw Jorge Méliès, they were making movies about faith and values. The first Passion play was made in 1897. The Nativity Story was made in 1898. In fact, there were 3 of them in 1898. And by 1915, 60% of the movies were being shown in churches. Edison tried to give the rights, the patents to the motion picture camera to his local presbytery, but Faitine, they didn't want it. They thought it was a toy. They thought it couldn't do any good. What a great joy to see all of you here. So, what happens? I know the first radio station was done in a church in Pittsburgh by the junior pastor, and the senior pastor thought it was a toy. Television was invented by a Christian up in Idaho just from watching the mowing of the fields. I don't believe that they invented any of this. I believe that God gave it to them to take every thought captive for Him and to worship through the power of creativity and communication and entertainment. So in 1915, the movie theater said, if you're going to show movies in churches, we're not going to let you show them in theaters. And then you went into the roaring 20s, Robert. And at that point, things got very debauched. Hedy Lamarr did 13 minutes of nudity and ecstasy, and things were much worse than even Diane mentioned. And what happened? 3 Christians, Daniel Day Lord, Martin Breen, and Joseph Breen and Martin Quigley, came in and said to Jack Warner, we can cure your box office problems by showing you how to make movies and entertainment. And the U.S. film industry was at the bottom of the barrel in film industries, and it went to the top. Now, I skipped over one thing. When they started Hollywood, it was started as a Christian retreat. You all know that, right? Okay, you don't know, well, you know it now. And it was a pretty live Christian retreat. And then as the years went on, they started to drift, and D.W. Griffith finally built Babylon to do Intolerance over Hollywood. But you know, the people of God persisted throughout the years. Joseph Breen, Martin Quigley, Daniel Day-Lord, they cleaned up the industry. The industry had Mr. Smith go to Washington. It was a wonderful life. And the bells of St. Mary rang out across the land. And there was the Protestant Film Office and the Roman Catholic Legion of Decency. There was the Paulists making great films and entertainment. There was Cathedral Films. I believe, you know, I hear a little bit of rumbling when somebody makes a commercial or makes a church film. They say, Jason, that isn't good enough. But I believe that God calls people to make church films like Cathedral Films. I believe that he calls people to make commercials and the Super Bowl, like Focus on the Family did. I believe that God is calling us to every area of entertainment. I also believe that the entertainment industry is not just about actors. My parents were actors in the 1930s. My father won the box office award. He was Bob Tex Allen, the first Texas Ranger. His real name was Ted Bear, but they didn't let you use your real name at that time. But the actors were the window dressing in the set. They did great things. He was on Broadway for years. But it's behind the scenes. So as we were praying earlier, I kept praying for the executives at Universal. Some of them who came to our gala, one of them who wants to read Christian scripts, people of faith and values scattered throughout Disney and Warner Brothers and all the rest. And those people persisted. In 1966, the Protestant Film Office shut down. You went from 100% what would be family-oriented, every film could be seen by anybody. It didn't say that you couldn't do violence, but you just wouldn't do violence in a way that Jason would run around and copy the violence. Or you didn't say you couldn't do romance, but you wouldn't do romance in such a way that it would cause susceptible youth to go off the tracks. What's wrong with that? You had violence in movies like The Bridge Over River Kwai, but it wasn't salacious. It wasn't pornographic. It didn't capture your essence and turn you into somebody who wanted to become violent. When the church left, we went from The Sound of Music in '66 to the first X-rated film in 1969. We went from the greatest story ever told about Jesus Christ, the Passion of the Christ of that year. Wolfgang, we went in 3 years, and you know this because you made the movie about transforming Hollywood. And 3 years later, we went to the first Sex and Satanism film. When the church shut down the Protestant Film Office, within 6 months, the Church of Satan set up a film office in Hollywood. You know, in any town where the gospel is not strong, what gets set up? An astrologer or something else gets set up. We have to go and take the territory. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't a lot of people who were doing different types of ministry. My friend Shorty Yeworth, who did some silly movies and led Steve McQueen and a lot of others to Christ, and Bob probably knows Shorty, and Bob Munger probably knows Shorty too, and Shorty did 1 Million BC and The Blob. Anybody remember The Blob? Actually, The Blob is a biblical allegory. But he had a ministry here. There were lots of ministries in Hollywood. But by the late 70s, most of them had shriveled up. They'd gone down to maybe one ministry and a few hiding and a couple of churches. Bob Reith was holding on, and then it started to flourish in '79. We started the Christian Film and Television Commission not to be the same ministry as everybody else. We're an advocacy group. We're sort of the feet. You know, we go and explore the land and look at the territory, give out a prize, and take the territory. But there are people who are the hands. Who are those, Robert? Those are the ones writing the scripts. And there are people who are the mouth, the people who are the actors. There are people fulfilling every role. What would happen if the mouth said to the foot, we don't need you? You'd fall down. You wouldn't take the territory. We need every type of ministry in Hollywood, and we need people going in to be gaffers, gophers, artists, dancers, writers, producers, directors, executive producers. We need financiers. We need the whole thing redeemed. Why? Just for the benefit of our children and grandchildren. I got two granddaughters who are great. They live in Tasmania, far away. But no, it's for the benefit of God. Because as Fatine says, God wants to see grace and values. So we came in the late 70s, and at the time that we started Movieguide, there was only one movie with positive Christian content, Trip to Bountiful. Last year, it was 57%. When we started, there were only 6 family films. Last year, it was 40%. When we started, 82% of the films were R-rated. Last year, it was 40% of the films. And we even honor some R-rated films like Schindler's List and The Passion of the Christ. We're not saying that you shouldn't make them. What we're saying is you have to have a valid reason for it, because you don't want to corrupt the hearts and minds of our youth. So the history of Hollywood is a history of the people of God going out like you're going to go out from here to take every thought captive for Jesus Christ by using every gift that God has given you. And then, unfortunately, the history of the church is once in a while we retreat. We retreated a couple of times. We retreated in 1915. We retreated in 1500 when we gave up the mystery plays. We retreated in 1965. What I'd like to see is that we never, never, never retreat. You are the history of Hollywood. You are the reason I'm here, to pass on the story, because throughout the journey through the Sinai, Moses has told Wolfgang, remember when I took you out of Egypt. Why is he told remember all the time? Because a miracle, once it happens, we explain it away with all sorts of humanistic explanation. But before a miracle happens, we know, Robert, how difficult it is. I want you to know how difficult it is, because when you see that you, being filled with the Spirit of God, are taking every thought captive of Jesus Christ, you know that you can take that award, put it in front of Jesus, because it's not you, it is a miracle from God. That is the history of Hollywood. God bless you and have a wonderful day.